I hope you can hear me and you can see the screen. If not, I screwed up and I need to do it again. But we will see how yeah, the audio is and if everything works. So today we want to talk about playing style, and I showed you a game I played, and I wanted you to have a think on how you would have played this game, and I prepared also some stuff here on other playing style, but we will first look at one model game or one game I want to show you. I think you already know the game, so it's nice, I think, so I can analyze it. Just because I think the ideas you had would lead to very nice positions and practically speaking, very bad positions for your opponent already. So the game starts in an Italian and bishop c5 and short castle, so very standard here. d6, c3, a6. You mentioned you always play rook e1 first. So how I treat the move order is, of course, here I play a4 because knight a5 is a threat. So after, let's say, bishop a7, I don't like to play knight d2 because he plays a short castle. And I like to play rook e1 here first. So he will start with h6 to prevent some bishop g5 ideas. So this is like the move order with bishop c7. I like to play rook e1 first. But if he starts with h6, there is no bishop g5. So of course, if he would castle here, I wouldn't play bishop g5. I can quickly show you the line. After h6 here, g5. There is the idea of sacking here. And let's say king g7, knight g2. There's the idea of king g6, h4 and rook h8. And then this is how black, I don't know if it's the right move order, but this is like the concept on how black plays this with a piece up. The king on g6 surprisingly is very safe. Maybe not in this move order with h5, I didn't check, but because this is something black don't like going into, he often starts with h6. So if he starts with bishop a7, which is the main move, if I play knight d2 now, he can just don't play h6 because there's no bishop g5. So after bishop a7, I will play rook e1 and he will probably go h6. But in the game, he played h6 before bishop a7, and after h6, there's I don't need to wait with knight d2, so I start with knight d2. And after a short castle, I play rook e1. I think it doesn't matter too much. Rook e8, knight f1, so I want to reroute my knight to g3 and play for d4. Because after takes, I always have problems protecting the e4 pawn, and I think this is like everything you will need to know for the theory. And here I like to play b4, and now I would like to play d4, but I first want to kick the knight out of c6. But if I would play b5 now, after takes, there's this move bishop takes h2, and I would lose my rook in the corner. So to prepare b5, I played the move rook a2. So after b5 takes, there's no bishop takes f2 because I just recapture with the rook. And he brought back his rook. I develop my knight, and after knight e7, I don't need to play b5 immediately because the knight moved away from c6 and I can play d4. So this is after rook a2, I'm out of book basically, but I still know the ideas and know where I position my pieces. So I got my rook in the center. I'm not too concerned about knight f4 now, because if I give up the bishop pair, I get a really strong center, and I have always ideas to push with e5 and c4. And I will just get a really nice space advantage, and I can use the center to just roll down the board later on. And I think I can get really nice base advantage and great play in the position. Also, this bishop is kind of dead forever, because if there's a pawn, the e-pawn moves to f4, there's no way to get the dark square bishop back into the game. So yeah, I just wasn't concerned about knight f4. I would be happy to trade off my dark square bishop. So he played knight d7, knight f5, queen f6 and queen c2, so I'm just developing my pieces. The queen on d1, queen c2, the engine doesn't love, but I mean, it's just a developing move. We're playing a 3-minute blitz game, so I just prepare my pieces, keep everything nice and protected. Yeah, so I'm just developing. Bishop e3, knight e6, and now I played g3. And he played king h7. So you will see that in a blitz game, my opponent couldn't come up with the right idea, because he don't want to really open up the position, give me the strong center, and I have ideas with e5 also opening up my queen now. So I'm just want to hold the tension in the center, and at a certain point where my pieces are are placed at the optimal squares, I will open up the position and my pieces come to life. But I'm not in a rush, and as you can see, my opponent had like 30 seconds less than me. You can always look at the times here, I think you know. So he basically ran out of ideas. Excuse my English. And yeah, h4, he just moved back. He didn't know what to do. And now he played knight d7. And now you said you were concerned about taking, and that you would probably reinforce the knight on f5, but the knight on f5 looks good. He has a knight outpost, because my opponent can really push g6 because the h6 pawn drops, but the knight is not really my best piece, or with the potential of becoming the best piece in the position, because yeah, I mean, the g5 would need to open up, and I would need to pressure this pawn, which can defend a million times. So even though this is a really strong piece, I think I would be happy. Let's just make a random move to get into this position. And after the knight moves, let's say the knight moves back, I have ideas of opening up the position, opening up my queen, and also getting my rooks active, like with a rook lift. So the position would be opening up, and my pieces are certainly better placed than the pieces of my opponent. So I continued in the game with knight h2. So the idea is, if he takes now, let's say knight f8 for example, it can get really dangerous, because I get f6 with tempo here, and g6 also opens up the f-file and gives me some ideas also here. So if the king would retreat, I would open up some lines and my pieces would come to life. So I'm not afraid of doing that, and I'm preparing that if he takes, I have a good follow-up to activate my queen and activate all my pieces. So you can see, if there wouldn't be any central pawns, my position would certainly be stronger. So my opponent don't want to take the pawns, and yeah, I don't want to trade yet, because I think there's still yeah, I can still how do you say, improve my pieces before opening up the position. So I'm not in a hurry. I'm just gonna make a quick cut here. I'm back in a second. Excuse me. So I'm back. Yeah, the position after knight h2, he continued with knight g8. He probably saw, even though he was in time trouble, that he don't want to take the knight, and yeah, just don't get any tension. It's really hard to find a move with 20 seconds on the clock for black. He couldn't get any counterplay on the queen side, and I'm clearly winning on the king side. So I continued with knight g4, and you can see I made this move in about 8 seconds. Because I had a minute on the clock, and I just know how to straightforward push this position. So I just wanted to attack the pawn and win the pawn, but computer says I missed a chance to take immediately, and this would be even stronger. I'm not gonna analyze this right now because the ideas and the strategy are pretty clear. And after knight g4, queen d8, I won the pawn here, and you can see here that I have potential outposts for my knights, and my position still remains really good. Also have ideas to opening up my queen, and black doesn't have any counterplay, and I'm a healthy pawn up. So this position already really scary. My opponent was in real time trouble here, so he just played knight g5 here to trade some pieces and hopefully survive this and play a pawn down in an endgame. But with 8 seconds on the clock, he missed that he hangs his queen. Because of course you can see I'm giving a check and the queen is hanging, and I control the g6 square. So I won this game, and while going over it, and you said what your strategy would be, and you said you don't like your strategy because you get these boring positions where there's nothing to play, and I disagree. Because before we look in this position in the first model game, let me just build up a position here. For example, let's take exchange semi-Slav. So I tried to make a cut here and edit this together, just so we can look at the structures you got with first playing d4 instead of playing e4. And I hope I pronounce it right, but it's called a Carlsberg structure. It's the English word. Of course, my English isn't that great, but basically in this structure, if we look at it, it's not a symmetrical structure, but it's, I don't know the explanation for it in English as well, but you can see it's basically the same structure but reversed. And you have some positional ideas. So for example, black wants to plant a knight on d6, for example like this. So he keeps control over the light squares and get some control, so you don't get a pawn break and the position doesn't really open up, and you control this weak pawn on b7 because the bishop will move out of the way at some point. And yes, black also likes to trade the light square bishop because this is like his bad piece and the dark square bishop is the good one. And here it's reversed, so we don't want to really trade the light square bishop, keep it on d3 and try to, for example in this position played, let's just put an example on the board here. So we try, of course, to limit the dark square bishop, and black will just try to plant a knight on d6. So let me just, for example, build up a position like this. This is like a strategic way. So of course we're not looking at the concrete positions, more about the structure here. So black will control the e4 square at some point, and it will hard for you to push e4, because even if you push d4, it will hard to maintain this pawn probably. If black is able, for example, to keep control over the square, and he will just play against an isolated pawn. And there's not really much to play for, because you often don't want to get this pawn break to weaken your own pawns. And on the same side, c5 often is also not possible for black. and even if c5 would be played, let's just put a position here on the board. It's the same for black. After, for example, a trade, this pawn can become very weak, and so there's no really pawn breaks in the position, and you just maneuver your pieces to the optimal squares, and the position is really dry and there's nothing to play for. So this is why you say you don't like close position. But if we look in the pawn structure in the Italian, as you can see, the first pawn trade was on move 25 or move 26, and on move 30 the game ended. So I think here all 8 pawns were still on the board. So there's a lot of potential pawn breaks. And that if we look back on the game, and you said how you would have fought and continued in the game, but you didn't like it, I disagree, and have some examples for you, because you said you have difficulties finding your playstyle, and yeah, I think just for an example for a closed position, I think if you show this, if you give this position to a bunch of players, they will, some will play d5 and some will won't. So here we can notice that the first the light square bishop were exchanged. This is like in the Italian often the case. And if we, let me just put this a little bit so you don't hear the moves louder than my voice, because I think it's, you need to listen on maximum volume to understand me properly. Yeah, and so we can notice, if we for example look at this position here, king h7, and here you mentioned you would like to push d4, but it would be a bad habit to get into the closed positions, and I disagree, because let's say after takes, you will see that the center is closed and the bishops are off the board, and you get a closed position, but you have ideas of playing b5 and connecting the rooks on the a file. Also ideas of playing c5, ideas of playing f4, ideas of playing h4, h5 or h4, g5. So you have a lot of potential play, and there are a lot of breaks in the position, and not as we saw in the structures you played before. You moved to 1e4, and we will see a nice example in a second. And I think if you look at this position, I would definitely choose white here. Maybe of course you can prepare d5 a little bit better. Let's for example say before even knight e6, don't allowing to get like something like here. Oops. So even if we say here queen c2, knight f8, and we play d5 here, and follow up with bishop e3 and recapture with the knight, so the knight on f3 isn't hanging after playing g3, and so you can coordinate the rooks better. Of course, you can decide if you want to play with d5, you will get also maybe better moment than the example. But I think d5 is a great idea, and it's just a preference of taste, which positions you like. So for example, I said I like to keep the tension, and you saw in the game how I like this position, but it doesn't mean you need to. So this is why I'm preparing this lecture. I think the idea of d5 is very reasonable, and if I would have 8 a.m. or 10 a.m. game in the morning, I would probably say like just had one coffee and needed to play a game in the morning. I would also maybe say, yeah, I'm just gonna close down the center, so I don't need to calculate if there are some tactics and take every move, for example. And it's just, yeah, a preference of taste, and I think d5 can lead to very nice positions. Yeah, so d5 is not something you say, yeah, I'm getting boring positions. I have one example, you probably know this game. And of course, we will compare this afterwards to the Italian. So, as I said, keeping the tension is my style of playing chess, but closing down the center and start winning, gaining more space on the queen side, trying to open up a file, trading some pawns, connecting your rooks, and afterwards you still have ideas to play on the king side, because you can see that we have gained some space already on the queen side here, and it's going to be very easy for, let's just example d5 as just an example. We will follow up with queen d3, queen b3, b5, and rerouting the rooks. Also probably throw bishop e3 in as well, just trading down the bishops, and then it's all about positioning the knights. And yeah, for example, before even taking the bishop, you could consider b5, and if he doesn't want to open the a file, for example, you can take and you maybe get a nice outpost for the knight on c6, just to name one example. Yeah, you could easily reroute the knight. Not this route, but you will figure out in the positions, and I think it is which positions to play. So there's a lot of ideas, and you can play these positions, and maybe I can, yeah, because it's your intuition to close down the center and gain some more space. I have a really nice example we will look at, and you will understand that. Let's take this this example as this pawn structure as an example again. There's not really much to play because you don't have any pawn breaks, but in the Italian and the Ruy Lopez, for example, where we have a look at the game, there is much more play, and of course you can get rid of the bishops first. And here it's a very dry position, and after, let's say, 10 to 15 moves, both sides just gonna sleep. One of the guys is gonna sleep, and the other says, "Yeah, I won on time." He fell asleep. It's basically how these positions feel. Let's put it this way. Of course, you will see this position and learn how to play these positions as well at some point. But I think it's if we focus on e4 and in our example the Italian, I think it's really nice. So let's move on to the first example. This game you probably know. It was played in Nice, France in the Olympiad, I think 1974, between Anatoly Karpov and Wolfgang Unzicker. Unzicker was a top 10, top 15 player in the world for over a decade, so over 10 years, maybe even 20 years. So he was a really, really strong player, and I think you know the game. So the game started out in a Ruy Lopez. So in Europe we call this the Spanish opening. You can say it's the brother or the cousin of the Italian. So these are the two oldest chess openings there probably are. So before people started playing 1d4, 1c4, everything was the Italian or the Spanish. And of course there are same pawn structures, but we will later compare this to the Italian as well. So we get a mainline Ruy Lopez, and this position you will see often. You can see the difference is that the bishop often lands on c2. So the knight doesn't need to get to g3 first to push d4. This is like the main reason. The bishop supports the pawn. And black basically plays knight a5 to get c5 in, to fight for the center, and later reroute the knight back to c6. And this is exactly what happens in the game. So knight d2, knight c6, and now Karpov decided to close down the position. and we will see, of course, which positional ideas can occur from this kind of playing style. And if your intention is to play d5 in these positions, of course you should always look at the, how do you say, at this at the position you want to, at the exact position you want to play d5. So this is just an example. Of course, there are some different things. The light square bishop, for example, are still on the board. And we will later get back to the Italian and compare this position for when you wanted to play d5. So knight d8 and a4. Let me quickly get the engine off here with the moves. A little bit annoying. So a4, rook b8, takes, and now you can see that the a file has opened. So Karpov traded one pair of pawns to get the open a file. And because the center is closed and there's not much going on the king side, he decided to play on the queen side. And this is exactly what he does. And he started it with b4, knight b7. Yeah, I'm not sure where the knight goes, but probably also wanna, if there are ideas of fighting for the open a file, there are often ideas of playing rook a5, so, and doubling up. And after black would take, white would get a passed pawn. So knight b7 prevents rook a5 ideas, but the knight doesn't have a really great future here, because of course he can move on any of the dark squares. And also from d8 there's no way to really get him back to the game. So Karpov played knight f1 and bishop e3, just developing, and now connecting the rooks. So if black would trade on a1, white would still remain the control of the open a file. So rook fc8 and bishop d3, g6, and knight g3. So just normal development. Black will try to reroute the bishop to g7. So if afterwards f4 would be played, maybe the bishop can get active, because these pawns are fixed and the bishop on e7 can't really get back into the game otherwise. So rook a2 is the same idea as rook a5. So if black would trade, the queen would still keep control over the open a file. And there's no rook c8, so white would remain control over the only open file in the game. And now c4. Yeah, so it's really hard to take here and opening up the position, because even though queen c3 is a move, it's like a one move threat. After, let's say, queen e2 as an example, there are always ideas of controlling then both of the open files. And Unzicker decided to close down the position, and now the light square bishop and the dark square bishop look very poor in these kinds of structures. And Karpov decided rightly to play bishop b1. Bishop f1 looks more like a human approach, but the problem is often that the knight will come back to e2 maybe, or reroute somehow to g4, and there are always problems of the e4 pawn. And at any point, if you want to move the knight, you don't want to look after your e4 pawn, because of course he holds the center together. So it's nice always to overprotect the pawn. And as you will see, the rook will land on a1, and because the position is very close, Karpov has a lot of time. So queen d8, and now a really important strategic maneuver. If you don't know this maneuver, it's nice to remember. It's bishop a7. So there's no way for black to make use of the spin, and if the bishop moves, white already prepared bishop c2 and rook a1, so he will dominate the open file. and yeah, there's not much black can do about it, so he tries to reroute his pieces to the queen side, and Karpov doubled out on the a file. Bishop b1 back, so you can see from the last moves he played bishop c2, get the walkover, and put the bishop back. And you can see in these close positions, you have really much time to coordinate all your pieces and develop a strategic plan of how to fight for the initiative. And as you can see, because white has a space advantage, it's really hard for black to develop the pieces properly, and all the pieces are really cramped on the back rank, and Karpov's pieces will, yeah, the bishop on b1 looks a little bit dubious for the moment, but the pieces will come nicely to life. So bishop e8, black can just wait here at this moment, trying to get a knight to d7, I don't know how, maybe to maybe remain some control over the dark squares, because the bishop on a7 controls really important squares in the position, of course, and black wants to, yeah, get some control back. So now knight d2, and if you would now, for example, have a knight on f6 and you want to play knight d2, and the bishop would be on f1, you would always need to prepare, and of course the bishop on f1 is hard to get back into the game. So it was the right decision to play bishop b1, and then he could maneuver the bishop also back and forth to optimize his pieces, because black can just really wait, and yeah, there's just not much black can play. But if you play the white side, of course you have a lot of plans, and you will see how the game finishes off. So knight d8, and now f4. So now because the queen side is basically also shut down, white decided to start playing on the king side, because all the pieces are looking on the queen side. It's really nice to take over the initiative on the king side as well. So after f6, f5 and g5, Karpov starts to closing down the king side as well, and you will see his strategic plan on how he's winning this position if everything is closed. If we would imagine there would only be kings on the board, this would just be a basic draw, because no pawn breaks, because all the pawns are all the pawns close down. There are no real pawn breaks anymore, and it just no king could infiltrate. But with pieces on the board, yeah, you will see how this position plays out, and it's really a brilliant game in this for this kind of game, and Karpov was a real master of his playstyle. So bishop back to c2, he has all the time in the world. Bishop f7, knight g3, and now bishop d1. This is a common maneuver, because if you look at the black pieces, none of them are really good, but the key piece that you want to exchange is of course the light square bishop, because he keeps control over the weakened squares, and our light square bishop is just behind our own pawn chain, and it's the worst piece in our position, so we're happy to trade it off. So after h6, bishop h5, queen e8, we are not in a hurry to take the pawn, to take the bishop, but we can still prepare, and this is exactly what Karpov does. So as you could see before, you have all the time in the world basically, and Karpov continues with queen d1, and after knight d8, also really great maneuver, rook a3 with the idea of rook a2, also preparing ideas of queen a1 and removing the bishop. So after the king side is shut down and the light square bishop are exchanged, white could continue playing on the queen side or playing on the king side, because the center is closed and he has the space advantage. So king f8 and rook a2 and king g8. You can see at this point, Unzeka just could wait. He could say he just went there, get off the board, drinks a coffee, and Karpov made a move. Okay, your turn again. He could just wait. He couldn't do anything. And Karpov has basically all the time in the world, and he still improves his position. Of course, knight g4, you can take the bishop, because after the trade, knight f6 wins the queen, basic discovery, and king f8 back, and knight d3 and king g8. So just rerouting the knight before making more progress here. And now he takes the light square bishop. So now you can see really that the light squares are really weakened. And yeah, black also ran out of moves basically. And now you can see that the long-term weaknesses will be very hard to how do you say you black just can't get any counterplay, and his weak squares are just, yeah, it's just crushing now. So after knight back to e8, really important here, queen g6. Karpov is not concerned of trading the queens because yeah, without queens on the board, he's basically also winning. And the problem is now black can't live with a queen on g3, but he also can't take it because after f takes g6, the knight will drop to f5 and would would attack the weak pawns on the dark squares. And after something like bishop f1, the bishop would be completely paralyzed. The other knight could jump into h5, also attacking the f6 pawn, and the king would be also paralyzed to keep control over the pawn. Meanwhile, white would just slowly infiltrate on the open file, and black just can't move here really. So king f8, knight h5, queen f7, and bishop b6. And now after a trade, this was probably also time trouble, but at this point with black, I would just resign. There's just no way you can ever play this position. All your pieces are paralyzed. Black can't move, so he can try to move back and forth, but he's just gonna lose. So Unzicker played rook b8, but didn't thought it would hang a piece in time trouble and resigned before Karpov made the last move. So you can see that it looks like a boring game. It's not an attacking game. If you look on move 46, there was just one pair of pawns traded, and the open file here, it was completely dominated by white, and the light square bishop were exchanged, and this left black with a lot of holes in his position. And on move 46, you think it's a rook end game, and they just move all the just check in the rook end game, but no, every piece is still on the board. And you can see really that you can get really rich positions from it. And if you like to play close position, this is like how do you say? It's like an extreme example, of course, because it's Karpov. He always played like this. And of course, we now looked at the Ruy Lopez. If we compare this game back to the Italian, and we just say we make some moves on the board, get the position back, and how it were, because up to this point you agreed on every move I made. Yeah, let's maybe just start with d5 here. And now the plans become really clear. The bishops gets off. The bishop will be exchanged off probably, and after something like queen b3 and doubling the rooks and opening the file, you will get a really great play on the queen side. Meanwhile, black will never really accomplish anything on the king side, and after you finish with the queen side, you can slowly improve and maybe also play for f4, and slowly but surely you still have a pawn break with f4, because you don't want to, of course, play f5. I think this would be a little bit too much, but you still have ideas with a pawn break, so it doesn't get too boring like with the Karpov. But I think if you like these positions, of course, we looked at an extreme example, but here I think it's very clear what the plans will be and how to proceed in this position. And I think you can play this as well, and you don't need to say, yeah, I don't want to force myself into some boring lines where there's nothing to play for. I think I would choose white every day, and if I would need to play a chess game in the morning, I would just play d5 and say, okay, I'm just slowly maneuvering all my pieces and stop black's counterplay, and I'm slowly but surely gonna make it till the end and hopefully just completely paralyze my opponent. So this was the first example on. Oh, excuse me, 1 second. I messed up. I will be right back. So I'm back. I just poured myself something to drink, and I a little bit landed on the laptop, but nothing happened. So no worries. Yeah, and I think we looked at a little bit of an extreme example, but I really like this game, and because of this game, because Unzicker was a really great chess player, and he dominated the chess world for decades, and just seeing him completely like strategically outplayed, and he was completely paralyzed. I mean, you wouldn't imagine that something like this happens to a top 10 player in the world, but you can clearly see that there are great plans in the positions, and of course you don't need to take it to this level. Can just play d5, break with b5 or c5, and afterwards, after you activated your rook somehow, let's say on the a file for example, you have still ideas to play with f4 and opening up the position, rerouting your rooks back again, and slowly but surely improve your position, stop the counterplay, and just play with a really great space advantage. And d5 is nothing in comparison to like these kind of pawn structures where there are no pawn breaks and nothing to play, because yeah, there's no space advantages, everything is symmetrical, and yeah, it leads to very dry positions. But I think with an advantage in the center, and your opponent without a pawn break, d5 is really strong. And for me, I just like to keep the tension. But if you're saying, yeah, I would like to close down the position and expanding on the queen side, this is certainly a strategy which you can do, and which leads to really nice games. And I think saying, yeah, I always get these boring closed games, and I'm gonna copy your playstyle is not a real approach. So we will, of course, look at some more games. Of course, we can discuss afterwards. Like maybe I can find some Italian model games as well, or we could, for example, yeah, analyze when to break with d5 in these positions. Of course, I didn't look it up if d5 works that great, but just from a strategically point of view, I think playing with d5 or playing without d5 is both possible. It's just a preference of taste. And we will move on to the next model game. I'm gonna make a quick cut here, set up the next position, and hopefully can cut it together, so it's just yeah, one cut.